What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction video, and in this one we have why Australia's economy is doing surprisingly badly. Really, all I know about Australia's economy, I guess the only thing that I would know about it right now is I know of the housing crisis that is going on over there, but the economy in general, I did not know was doing badly. So I guess I'm going to learn a lot of new information in this video. However, before we dive in, if you happen to enjoy, please don't forget to subscribe, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested, and let's dive right in.
This video is brought to you by Brilliant. For most of the past 50 years or so, Australia's economy has been the envy of the Western world. A combination of a reliable commodities industry and a strong domestic economy has allowed Australia to weather basically every major global economic crisis without entering recession, helping earn it the nickname the Lucky Country. However, in the past few months or even years, it looks like Australia's luck might have finally run out. After suffering its first recession in over 30 years during the pandemic, Australia's economy...
Of course, every country went negative during the pandemic, so you can't judge it. But then their economy boosted up. But Jesus, yeah, this at the end where you see these 4 reds in a row, it's showing no growth. Not bad drops. So that's really good. But just no growth at all, I don't think is ever a good thing.
The economy has struggled to recover. While GDP is still growing, this is only because of immigration, and GDP per capita has now actually fallen for 4 consecutive quarters. So in this video, we're going to look at how the invincible economy became vincible, and why things only look like they're going to get worse in the near future.
Okay.
Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos.
Do that.
So let's start with a bit of context, because Australia's recent economic history is pretty astonishing. Australia was originally nicknamed the Lucky Country in the 60s because of its abundance of natural resources, including iron ore, coal, copper, gold and oil. And its economic success has been built on exporting vast quantities of all of these around the world, especially to booming economies in Asia like China. Now, as we've mentioned in other videos, an abundance of natural resources can often be as much of a curse as a blessing, because they can make your economy overly dependent on commodity exports. Demand for your natural resources can push up the value of your currency, making your other exports less competitive and making it harder for you to develop more advanced industries. Economies that are too dependent on commodity exports also often breed corruption and inequality, because politicians can develop overly cozy relations with the industry and fail to redistribute the export revenues, which then accrue to a small number of industrialists. This phenomenon is known as Dutch disease, and it at least partly explains the stagnation we see in many developing countries, including commodity exporting countries in Africa and oil exporting countries in the Middle East. However, Australia has apparently avoided the worst of Dutch disease, in part because even if Australia doesn't quite have a Norway-style sovereignty wealth fund, its relatively stable politics has allowed it to better redistribute its national income and nurture the domestic Australian economy. And it's this combination of a reliable export base and a relatively strong domestic economy that's allowed the Australian economy to fare so well in the past few decades.
So right now he's just kind of talking about what has made Australia's economy so successful in the past few decades and why it's considered the Lucky Country. He's talking about the exports being able to support the country and continue to raise the GDP growth. As you can see, some years of growth is up and then some kind of stagnant then back then, but never a big drop. When it drops, only big drop is of course due to the pandemic, where everybody's economy suffered. I believe it was everybody's, correct? If not, correct me. But then other than that pandemic, nothing out of the norm. So they've been able to storm everything, it seems like, since the 60s until now. They've been able to storm everything where their economy has not took a big hit, and they've shown lots of growth in some years. So So far, Australia, I guess the lucky country does make sense because Australia has been good.
GDP grew every quarter from 1991 until the pandemic in
That's
2020,
incredible.
the longest consecutive streak in world history.
Oh,
A strong
wow.
domestic economy helped it weather the Asian financial crisis in the late 90s, which crippled its largest trading partner Japan, and a commodity boom driven by Chinese demand allowed Australia to sail through 2008. Australia today has the 10th highest GDP per capita globally, and Australians are some of the wealthiest people in the world. According
make
to
bread.
UBS's annual Global Wealth Report, Australia today has the 5th highest mean wealth and the 2nd highest
God
median wealth in
dang.
the world, behind just tiny Luxembourg. Unlike
Jeez.
other developed economies, many of which have experienced wage stagnation since 2008, Australian income continued to grow during the 2010s, rising by about 15% between 2008 and 2022. Australia's robust economy, plus the fact that it's a sunny, open place, has made it one of the most desirable places in the world for immigrants.
I mean,
Australia has reliably experienced some of the highest immigration rates in the developed world, which has
Yeah.
boosted GDP and protected Australia from the demographic crisis afflicting similar countries. Australia had its first recession in nearly 40 years during the pandemic. This wasn't surprising, but what has been a bit of a shock is Australia's apparent inability to get out of it. While Australia is nominally out of recession, this is only because of immigration, and GDP per capita has actually been falling. At the same time, wages have stagnated at nearly 10% below their pandemic peak, and living standards have been further squeezed by persistent inflation, causing 9 consecutive quarterly declines in real household income.
God dang, real household disposable income per capita. I'd love to see like a chart of America because the inflation and everything we got going on here, boy, is hitting hard. It is a struggle out here for real, for real. But I mean, just according to Australia's past, this is just unusual. This just ain't normal. The lucky country, the country that's always showing growth, and they have the longer streak of showing growth, to now start to, I guess, fall in decline on some of these charts. And if you live in Australia, please, in the comment section, let me know how you feel about this. Because I know some of my videos I watch, information is untrue or I get false information. And you guys let me know in the comment section that no. So let me know in the comment section, do you agree with what he's saying here? Or are some of these numbers you don't agree with? But it seems like, yeah, I guess Australia's last 4 quarters or so has not shown growth.
The biggest dive
capita.
in living standards in recorded history. So, what's gone wrong for the lucky country? Well, some of this is just a normal consequence of tight monetary policy. Australia's year-on-year inflation rate peaked to 8.4% in December 2022, lower than in places like the UK or the Eurozone, but it's proven remarkably stubborn, falling to 3.4% in December 2023,
God
before
dang.
rising to 4% in May of this year. This has forced Australia's central bank to aggressively raise interest rates from 0.1% in 2022 to over 4% today. This has slowed down the economy, largely via mortgage costs. Essentially, because property in Australia is eye-bleedingly expensive, Australians spend a lot of money on mortgage payments, and when interest rates go up, so do these payments, squeezing household spending. But there are also some Australia-specific factors at play here. The first one we just alluded to, Australia's housing crisis. At first glance, you might assume that housing would be pretty cheap in Australia. After all, it's an enormous country with a relatively small population. However, because most of the population is concentrated in small areas, and because the Australian tax system actively encourages treating property as an investment, housing in Australia is actually inordinately expensive, especially in cities like Sydney and Melbourne. The ratio between the median house price and the median income has risen from about 3 in the 1990s to nearly 10 today, one of the highest in the world, and rising to over 10 in Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide. High housing costs are bad news for an economy for a whole load of reasons. They reduce domestic demand by forcing households to spend all their money on mortgage repayments or rent, and they prevent people from moving to high productivity areas like cities. The other Australia-specific reason is a slump in its exports. Australia's commodity exports have been undermined by a combination of falling global prices, with iron ore prices falling 30% this year alone, and weak demand from China, which has been Australia's largest export market for years now, but is currently struggling with its own economic crisis. But
so right now they're going through an export slump. On top of that, the housing costs are rising. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I've seen videos. I know about the housing crisis already and how expensive it is. I know how expensive it is to even rent over in Australia right now. And trust me, I feel that inflation over here in the U.S. Inflation is just insane. It's insane. You after you pay bills, you don't got money to just spend on wants. All the money only covering the needs. It's covering electricity. It's covering the water. It's covering necessities. But wants, no luxuries out here. So I completely understand that. But I don't know how the future, I guess, will look. Hopefully Australia's economy bounces back into that growth rate. It doesn't look like it's falling much. It doesn't look like it's in a big, steep decline. But from the charts that I saw in this video, it does look kind of on that path of just constant decline. So hopefully it bounces back and the growth continues, because Australia is an incredible country full of incredible people.
On top of that, Australia's largest service export, education, has also come under pressure recently. Before the pandemic, education, i.e. students coming to study in Australia, was Australia's fourth largest export behind coal, iron ore, and natural gas. However, in the past few years or so, a lack of reliable domestic funding has made the sector increasingly reliant on foreign students, who essentially subsidise domestic students.
Well, are they not? I thought I saw like video titles or news or something that said Australia was about to start like limiting immigration, like students being able to come over. Is that the case, or did I see that wrong?
However, as immigration has become a politically salient issue, largely thanks to the housing crisis, the Australian government has responded by cutting student visas, putting even more strain on the education system. All in all, things don't look good for the lucky country, and diversifying its export base while simultaneously deflating one of the world's biggest housing bubbles won't be an easy task. Understanding these kinds of issues is really important, but also difficult. That's why TLDR is here to help you. Unfortunately, though, the world's only getting more complex, especially when it comes to tech and AI. Now, I'm not qualified to teach you about that, but luckily, Brilliant are. Brilliant.
Okay, the last minute is going to be sponsored content. But, yeah, please, y'all let me know in the comment section how y'all feel about that video. How's the economy for, I guess, someone living in Australia? How is it cost of living right now? Is it crazy expensive? Is it a struggle to have wants? Your needs are covered, but it's a struggle to have wants? Or do you actually feel like, oh, you're still good? There's still money in your pocket after you get to pay bills and everything. I'm very intrigued to know, because I know how I feel over here. And over here, I feel like I'm covering the needs, but I ain't no money in the pocket afterwards. Not a single penny in the pocket after needs are covered. So very intrigued, but that is all we have for this video. If you guys enjoyed that, please don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and then check out that next video. See you guys there.